playing music, and he got a gig with a group, and like those little things. Meanwhile, you're out here on the ranch in the far, far away range type of thing, uh, fighting giant like monster oozes and trying to save your little slimes and keep them safe. And then there's this other story of the rancher that came before you, and you're seeing that rancher who is another guy who, similar to you, the character, um, decided to like he left behind all of his life, bought this range, and was enjoying the lifestyle of just living free. You do what you want. You take care of your range, you take care of the stuff, but you choose all the things in your life. You don't have to answer to anybody. And you're listening to this guy's story, and as you progress through the game, you're getting these aspects of your own past, of your like ex-boyfriend Casey and what he's doing, and then you also listening to this guy, Hobbs was his name, and his journey through the game, and his journey through discovering all these amazing things on this range. And then he meets this one person at like a space station, and he's like, wow, that girl was amazing, like I kind of want to interact with her again. And then as you're going through, Hobbs is talking about all the times that he's finding he's spending more time thinking about this person. He's like, I mean, I love my ranch, I love my slimes. This is my life, but I'm interested in seeing what maybe a life with her might be. And eventually, as you get to the end of the game, close to the end, um, there are some big things, so I won't spoil it. But as you get close to the end, you find out that Hobbs, as opposed to the player, and sort of like as a juxtaposition, is now curious as to like, well, maybe there is more to my life, not to everyone's, but to my life than what I'm currently doing. Like maybe I can do something else. And at the very end of Hobbs' journey, he's like, you know what? I decided I'm making the big decision. I had to decide between my ranch and a life with this woman. And it's not an easy decision to make because he spent 20 years here. He's built this whole thing. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna take the plunge. And you go to the next room and you find the next little like recording, and it's Hobbs going, I'm selling the ranch. And like it was just that one step from I got to make a big decision, and then you go to the next room and you grab it and you hear that decision that he made, and that reflects the decision that the character made before the game even started to buy the ranch, to step away from that life. God, like just think about it right now. I got like little handshakes because you just spent hours in this game, weeks in game, um, and and you've seen Hobbs' journey, and then you felt your journey, and you've listened to Casey's journey, and at the end of the game, you play the character's name is Beatrice. You guys by be sitting there, and you check on your last email after you've you know conquered the entire range. You have all the different slimes. You're selling gajillions of dollars of plorts every day, and you check on that last email from Casey, and he's like, "Hey, I think I met somebody. She's pretty great. Also, I wrote a song. It's kind of about you. It's kind of about us. It's kind of just about life." And then that's when the credits roll, and then you just hear like this sad little guitar playing, and the guy singing, and I was crying so much. Like I think my mom heard me from the hallway, and I was just doing. Oh man, video games. I'm a big proponent of the phrase "cry today, win tomorrow." A good cry is so integral to good health, and when a video game can give that to you, oh my god, oh my god, it's so good. Okay, are we good? Ready to begin? Okay, I I couldn't get the clicker to work, so I'm just gonna tap. It's my computer's old and a Mac, so
Well, let me just quickly introduce
please do.
you. I know. Thank you for buying me some time.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%.
so, if you're not familiar with me, I'm Jamal Lewis, go by Jazz or Lewis. Or, You know, yeah. So I'm the president of Musical Foundation. The chair of the board is Nika Simone, and the founder of Musical Creation. She had a dream a while back, years ago, and she wanted to help young people in art, not just music, but in painting and all that. She's a musician. She's a songwriter. She's a smooth jazz artist, um, and that gives young people connection. She has the connections to get exposed to different things. So that's the spirit of this, and we're running a gaming um, kind of series right now. Last month was coding as it relates to gaming. Today it's going to be music as it relates to gaming. Um, and then from there, we're going to move forward into this is the STEM portion of Musical Creation Foundation. And then we'll get into music, production, that type of stuff. So, I just wanted to welcome everyone here. I appreciate everyone taking the time out on a Saturday early in the morning. I got young nephews who are in college and home for spring break, and this is a rough deal. So thank you for coming out. And I really would love for Nika if you want to say anything to, just talk about your dream, which is now happening.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited.
Right. Well, hello everyone, and thank you all again for being here today. As Jazz has said here, for Musical Creations Foundation, I had a vision of being able to empower students as yourselves, young people, to bridge the gap between arts and science, especially when it comes to people of color. So I really want to that um, see that happen with our young people and to become leaders, to go out here and to do magnificent things in the world. And I wanted to be sure to reach those, reach all those young people where they are, you know. And I know that gaming is big. I'm not a big gamer. I do a little bit on my phone. That's all I got. But
You're a
but
gamer. It counts.
okay, I'll take that. Thank you. But this is where we're starting with some of our series, and we are going to continue to do more. So I hope that you all will stay with us as we continue to move on, and that you'll learn and grow along with us, and continue to come back, and that we'll just be able to watch you develop and evolve, and maybe you will find something to take with you on your path and journey as you go on. Okay.
And now, without further ado, there's a gentleman that's been talking for a little while here. His name is Gabriel Perez. Gabriel works for a gaming company that's here in Ashland that I still don't know where it is yet. One day I'm going to come to this place and actually see.
It's very close to
Oh,
here.
see.
I could walk there.
Okay, awesome.
But it's also it's an indie studio, so classic like Microsoft kind of indie studio. Like it's literally a house. It's a little white house.
Oh, okay. See, that's probably why I couldn't find it.
Yeah,
But I
it's a
just,
little white house with Tesla out back. So
oh, nice, nice.
so it's one of those. It's like the sleeper tech houses. There's a lot of technology inside of there and a
Awesome.
big power budget.
Okay. Awesome, man.
A lot.
And so Gabriel's given his presentation today. He was gracious enough. Actually, he was really enthused about it because we've been talking for about 3 months, just back and forth. Him, Brandon, myself, and we just, so he was very excited about coming here and presenting this stuff for you. And without further ado, Gabriel Perez.
Thank you. Um, really quick. Oh, we got some more people. Hello, welcome. Uh, Again, thank you so much for is Musical Creation Foundation for providing this space. For me, one of my biggest goals forever is going to be lowering the barrier of entry for people into creativity and creative arts, especially with. I mean, I work in the video game industry at the moment. I've also worked in the tabletop games industry for a while. Those are two entertainment areas that are very heavily white dominated industries. So it's important for me to be able to like offer up the validity and accessibility of those industries to people of color, because it's not easy when 100% of your coworkers need a lot of sunscreen. And just the conversations that can come from that. It can be tricky. So hopefully, if in a year from now I'm still in this industry, you know that hey, you can make it too. And I haven't gotten like run out on a rail. So today we'll be talking about making music for video games on this lovely little slideshow that I made. My name is Gabriel Perez. I am a composer, sound designer, audio engineer. I can throw in a bunch of other things there, but those are the relevant ones. As you progress through life professionally, I'm sure lots of people in here know you just add things onto that resume, and then every time you need to submit one, you pick like the best three. You're like, I'm good at these things. This is my specialty. I love agendas. I like when people get to make informed decisions. So I made a little agenda of the things that we're going to do and talk about today. We're going to start with why do games have music? Move on to some of the biggest challenges. Talk about some design styles. We're going to mix it up with some games that sort of use music as a mechanic instead of just have nice music. And then we're going to have a nice Q&A session at the end. I will not. This will probably be a brief-ish presentation, so feel free, please collate as many questions as possible. If you can save the question for the end for the Q&A, I would appreciate that. That way we can have them all together. But if it's something that like it's not going to stick, feel free to raise your hand. Also, if you need me to like stop, reiterate, or go back to something, feel free to raise your hand. All right, so big question. Why do games have music? It's one of my favorite questions because has so heckin' many answers. But I've limited it down to 3 of my favoriteest answers. And those answers are immersion, feedback, and emotional impact. I've selected 3 games. This is far from a comprehensive list, but 3 games that I feel really exemplify these 3 aspects. The first one here, Subnautica. It is the score is by Simon Shelensky, and the game Subnautica is similar to when I was talking about earlier with Slime Rancher. Subnautica is a game where you play a person in a far, far, far away future, like far in the distant future, where like universal basic healthcare, all that kind of stuff, has like it's happened and we're past it. You can synthesize anything with just light technology and basic materials, all that cool stuff that makes the video game easier to make. But you play as a person who has crash landed on an alien planet that is almost entirely ocean. So you are having to swim around, and you are trying to navigate the sheer terror. And the reason I say sheer terror, I do not have thalassophobia, but a lot of people that I know have thalassophobia, and that is the fear of large bodies of water. And this game is thalassophobia in game format. There are many times where you will turn a corner underwater and you will just see blue into darkness, and then maybe something moving in that darkness, and you're like, nope, I don't need that today, and you're swimming in a different direction. But I got a music sample. Let's see if it'll play. This is audio. There we go. So again, this is just a little clip, but designed to create that sense of immersion, that falling in. I apologize to people watching this as a recording if you cannot hear it very well. There you go. Yeah. I do not. That is a good question. Is there a restroom? Thank you. Okay, so that was again just a brief little. I'm not trying to get copyright striked on here. Um, of Subnautica again, like creating immersion. The importance of immersion in a game is just like any kind of storytelling. You don't want the person to feel like they're not there. You want them to feel like they belong in this world, that they are a part of this world. Even if you are just playing I don't know, like the Harry Potter video game or watching a television show. Like you want the viewer to believe that they're in that world. The next one is feedback. Feedback in a video game is incredibly important because again, the player has agency. The player's doing something. So there are times where the music, the score, can be used to showcase what is happening and what the player's actions are doing. In this one, as an example, I have a snippet from LA Noire, um, which is a very fun noir gumshoe detective game that gets pretty crazy near the end. But the score, one of the ways that they utilize it in the game is as you're a detective, you're going around crime scenes, all that classic procedural crime stuff, and the music's playing in the background. But if you happen to wander, the game's not going to stop you from wandering away. But if you happen to wander too far away from the crime scene, the music gets quieter and quieter. It's a very beautiful score. If you like classic, like noir style movies, so fantastic. Andrew and Simon Hale did a phenomenal job. But again, as you are playing this game, if you wander away from the crime scene, the music fades out, and it triggers to the player, hey, there's no clues over here. There's cool scenery. You can talk to people still, but like there's no clues. The game is back in this direction. Please return. And then last, very far from least, I chose a snippet from the score for The Last of Us, written by Gustavo Santal. Ooh, oh, Santaolalla. That's it. Sorry, I was like, I remember saying this the other day. But anyone who has either played The Last of Us or seen the HBO show knows that it is a very heckin' emotional show or game. I cried several times playing it, watching it as an HBO show. I think there were maybe 2 episodes in it that I didn't cry during. And this will be very small. Again, games are about telling a story and emotional stories. Emotion is the thing that kind of draws us into a story. Those of you who have played the game or watched the show, this is the piece that plays during a hospital scene at the very end. It is by far one of the most emotional scenes. It's the moment when the main character has to make a really heckin' not good decision. Like his 2 decisions, both really simple, but one of them is a redemption for him of something that he couldn't do at the beginning. And the characters, it's that feeling I'm sure a lot of us have had where you're like, I don't have a good decision right now, but I know what right is for me. And that's what I got to do. And this is what plays during the, again, just hearing it right now. Absolutely gorgeous story and on that very tender note, we're going to move on. I think that's the last of the audio stuff, so we're good. So that is why games have music. Now we're going to move on to some big challenges in video game production. So what are some of these big challenges that we have? There's a lot, but I'm going to pick 5. First one is listener fatigue. If you are composing music for something, I mean, I'm sure all of us have like that song that we love to listen to. And maybe it's a song that is fun to listen to. That was my wake up alarm for typical days. Um, I work nights, but yeah, listener fatigue is, imagine you have your favorite song that you love to listen to, but now you're forced to listen to it on repeat while working, and it doesn't go away. Um, that is something that is a challenge for every video game composer. That's why a lot of modern games, you will look at what their like what their score is, and it's like 300 audio files, because they want to give the listener different things to listen to, so that you don't get that listener fatigue, so that you don't go like, oh god, this theme again. Another thing that I've just often heard in video games, and this isn't the nicest thing to hear when you are like a composer for a game, is that a lot of people will just mute the music in a game and play their own music in the background, which is, again, I super want people to play games how they want to play them. That's the most important thing. But it's also like, man, but I worked hard on that. Technical constraints. This is a thing for every STEM industry job. Technical constraints that often happen in video game production, especially when it comes to music, is whether you have room for, like, nowadays that's less of a problem, file compression and size and stuff like that. But if you think back to like the NES, like those games, that game cartridge, I think the biggest NES game was 1 megabyte in size, and a typical MP3 of a 3 minute pop song is about 1.2 megabytes. So take that into the consideration. Nowadays, games, they want to have hours and hours of music, but you have to make sure that those audio files are created in a way that won't bloat the game and cause these audio files to crash the game as it's loading. Some other technical constraints that can often come up are like, how are you integrating this music into the game system? Is it a very simple game, not a whole lot of complex mechanics? Then maybe you can do something, just have like the wave files or the MP3s playing in the background and have very simple programming for it. If you are thinking about getting into video game anything, you're going to want to know a little bit of programming. It's always helpful because then you know what to. I think Brandon spoke more to this last time. You're going to you don't want to set up your programmer for pain when they're like, this doesn't work, and then you're like, oh, I guess I have to remake this entire score. Um, Speaking into that, soundscape mixing. So older video games, you can only have a certain number of different sounds playing at the same time. If you go all the way back to like, again, like NES games, you could have 5 sounds that played simultaneously. That means at any moment, you like, if there were more than 5 things happening that might have a sound, one of them would just not happen, or several of them would just not happen. Nowadays, you can have upwards of 30 to 40 different sound actors in a scene, but that costs more and more processing power and memory, so it's not great to always lean into that. But with any kind of audio production, um, even if you're just performing on stage, you don't want to have just a wall of sounds coming at the listener. You want to make sure that things are mixed correctly. You have your like frequency spectrum, your low frequency things are taking up their space. Your high frequencies things have more space to work with, but you also don't want them to be the loudest thing, because high pitched noises hurt more to hear. And that's the same thing with soundscape mixing in a video game. If you have footstep sound effects, if you have gunshot sound effects, if you have a score playing, if you have someone yelling, if you have a monster roaring, that's 5 things that are happening, but those can be 5 very loud things. And then if you have, it's a multiplayer game, well, now you have someone else's footsteps, someone else's gunfire, another set of monsters. You have so many things happening, and then you have the score playing in the background. It can get heckin' complicated, and it is constantly a challenge for all audio people. Another classic one for pretty much any industry, scope and deadlines. It's not a fun one, but it is a very necessary thing, especially when it comes to working collaborative projects. You can't have the game release date. Be like, oh, I'll just finish all the scores a week before release and we're going to be good. Because you also have to think about when do you get the performers to perform those scores. You have to think about recording time. You have to think about editing time. You have to think about um, programming time and implementation. You have to think about like, is this going to work? Like we were talking with the technical constraints. If something doesn't work, well, now you need to go back and fix it. And if you don't schedule things correctly, or if you find that what you have planned is far out of scope of what you can do, you know, some AAA games want to have really amazing show-stopping scores for their games, but they're also like, you have 6 weeks to do it. And so you're like, well, let's see what I can do in that scope. Let's see what I can do in 6 weeks, and not what I'd like to do, and then see if I can do that in 6 weeks. It's very different. But those are all weak sauce compared to the biggest challenge, which is what the heck is the player going to do? Um, so I talked before we were recording, about all the different kinds of storytelling that there is in the world. Pretty much all of them are linear. So you have the beginning of the movie, you have the end of the movie, you have the beginning of the play, the end of the play. Songs start and they finish. And for the most part, other than like a play pause and a rewind, like the viewer doesn't have any control over that progression. It's gonna happen in that order, unless they play the movie backwards. That'd be funny. But again, like it's still in that order. You think of like a musical score, like all those notes are in a specific order, and the listener can't change that. In a video game, however, the player the player never even has to press start. They don't. They can just sit on the welcome screen forever. And so if you're like, oh, I want this to have a crescendo that goes from here to here, you can't force the player to do the thing in the time you want them to do it. So one of the biggest challenges when it comes to creating music for video games is you have to create something that is interactive and adaptable. It can't just be a song or a score that starts and ends. It has to be pieces. It has to be multiple scores that can fit in any sequence in any order. You can't control if the player goes from the Mushroom Kingdom to the Enchanted Forest and then to the Spooky Swamp, because they might go to the Spooky Swamp first, unless the game actually keeps them from doing that. But even then, you can't control how quickly the player goes from the Mushroom Kingdom to the Enchanted Forest. Maybe they took forever because they're bad at games like me, or they're really heckin' good at games and they went so much faster than you anticipated them to. In all these situations, every single playthrough of every single player in every game is going to be unique. Sometimes that's not as huge of a constraint for certain games, some very linear games. But ultimately, again, one of the biggest things with that is you just can't control when the player presses start or when the player acts. So you need to have something that can flow. Now, there are a couple, I added this next slide very last minute, so it's a little disjointed with the flow. But there are a couple things that we can use to integrate and hopefully ameliorate some of these challenges. These are the three top, they're called middleware. Technically, the top two are middleware. The bottom one is part of Unreal Engine. Softwares that are used to integrate music and sound into a video game. And the reason that these are necessary, excuse me, instead of like in a games engine, whether you're using Unreal Engine or Godot or whatever that cube one is, it's got a name. Unity. There we go. If you're using those engines, they typically have programming and code and lots of flexibility within them. However, the way that music and audio works is not necessarily the same way that the world's like physics and reality works. And to give the audio people more control, these middlewares were created to enable essentially like a good example, actually an example for what I do at Big Top Game Studios are working on a VR game. VR has a lot of big challenges. One of the biggest ones being the player's in a three-dimensional space always, and the player has like essentially headphones on, so you can use 3D spatialized sound, which is super cool. But that also means all audio files need to be, or all audio in the game needs to be localized in specific areas. You can't just have audio playing, otherwise it plays directly on the player's head, and that's weird if it's someone talking across the room. So you have to have the audio programmed to come from that person across the room. But how do you make it sound like it's actually coming across the room? Well, I mean, you can hear it here. There's echo. There's a thing called attenuation, which is the basics of attenuation is just as something travels, it gets quieter. As something travels through air, it gets quieter. And then there's occlusion, which is like when something gets in front of something else. Like if I put my hand here, all of a sudden I'm much quieter than I am with like this. So you have attenuation, you have occlusion, you have reverb, which is it echoing off of the walls. Those are all things that you can hard program in. But if you hard program that in, that means the developer, the programmers for the rest of the game, have to create so many special cases for so many specific sounds. However, if you're using something like Fmod, Wwise, or MetaSounds in Unreal Engine, the flexibility that comes with those is you can set up an attenuation sphere in one of these. And so it just tells that sound effect or any of the sound effects that use that same attenuation how dense the air is, kind of thing, and how far that fall off is with that sound. If it's a small, small sound, you're not going to be able to hear it from 10 feet away. But if it's a big sound, you'll be able to hear it from 50 feet away and it's going to be quiet. But when you get real close to it, it's going to be at maximum volume. And those are things that you can program in this. And then the beauty of it, you program it in this, and then the programmer just plops it in the game, and that's done. It's gorgeous. It is so helpful. I primarily use Unreal Engine, MetaSounds. MetaSounds is a brand new sort of audio processing game software. It's a lot of fun. It's very weird looking. I don't know if anyone here has ever used modular synthesis, but have you ever seen those like music performers where they have like 15 boxes with chords plugging into each other and there's knobs and buttons? It's very much that, but digital. Very fun if you like tech and audio. Moving on, design styles. So I'm going to go over 4 core design styles for audio and video games. This is honestly like audio in or music in many storytelling formats. But the other two, the last two that I get into, are going to be very specific for interactive formats. So I'm also going to be using some more complicated technical jargon, but I'll hopefully break that down effectively. So there are 2 styles of how audio can appear in a setting. There's diegetic and incidental. Diegetic means it is something that can be perceived by the people in that story. So the difference there being, or an example, I have this little like radio from Fallout. In Fallout, if music's playing on the radio, everybody in that scene can hear that music. If something happens on that radio, everyone in that scene can hear that. But counter that to incidental music, that's the stuff that only the viewer can hear. So when the action music picks up, most of the time, that's not actually happening in the game. If you walk into the Enchanted Forest and you hear harp music playing, most of the time, that's not actually going to be in reality. If you walk into a real life forest, hopefully you don't suddenly hear strings. I would be concerned. Well, it depends on the strings. If it's really pretty, I'd be like, oh, the orchestra's here. But that's the main difference there, and it's important to know those differences because it allows you to tell the story in different ways. You can have that supporting score happening, but it would very much take the player out of the seriousness of the scene, of that hospital scene in The Last of Us, if there was an orchestra in the hospital too. That wouldn't make sense. Or if that music was playing over the loudspeakers, it would have a very different vibe than if that's playing just the player. Than in other games where you walk into like a tavern and there's like a bawdy tavern song going on, or there's like a bard in the corner that's playing toss a coin to your witcher. Like that's happening in the world, and it's important that it's happening in the world because that's something that can be referenced later in the game. You shouldn't have somebody talking about the score in the game, but you can have somebody talking about diegetic music. Uh, Now, those are sort of like how it fits into the game programmatically. So these next two, horizontal resequencing and vertical reorchestration. I know, big, gorgeous words. But they are fortunately very simple concepts. So horizontal resequencing is, remember when I was talking about you can't tell what the player is going to do? So let's say you have these three themes. You have your home theme, you have your adventure theme, and you have your action theme. But you don't know when the player is going to be in the home area, or they're out adventuring, or they're in a fight. So horizontal resequencing, I did a little animation to show. It's literally horizontally you can resequence. You allow the different themes to be shuffled. A game that does this phenomenally, I think, is there's came out a long time ago, ish. Uh, Monkey Island 1 and 2, especially Monkey Island 2. It was an older game. I think it was just for PC, but it is one of those like big clunky, like it's like two CDs or something to run it. Um, but in that game, every single room that you would go to would have a different theme that would play. So you would go visit the apothecary. You would hear a different theme. The moment you left there, the best thing about how they worked with this game, they actually created a special software that would slowly transition from one score or one theme into another. So you, as the player, wouldn't super notice it until maybe the fifth or sixth time that you've done it, that you were in one area and you're hearing like this, poppy jazz kind of thing, and then you step into the other thing and it shifts. The piano falls away, and then it goes more into drums, and now you're into like this very jungly drums, kind of doom 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 doom, and then you go into another area and it shifts theme again. But the beauty of that system is the player can go back and forth between two places and constantly be going from theme one to theme two to theme one to theme two, and then they can go from theme one to theme three, and then back to two, and then to five, and then to one, and that allows for again the flexibility of um, allowing for player agency. The last one, vertical reorchestration, is also sometimes referred to as vertical composition, vertical change, any number of things. The idea there is that, so if you think of the horizontal resequencing being you have things changing within time, vertical reorchestration is you are changing what is being played at this sort of in the same theme at the same time. I actually have. We can probably pop out of this. Ignore my desktop briefly. Um, if you could bring the microphone over. So there's a lot of games that do vertical reorchestration. This is Logic Pro, a software that I use frequently. But in these are all what are called stems, not related to the STEM field, but these are stems. Think of like a branch and stems. Uh, and this is often used in music production where your drum track will be a stem, your vocals, your lead vocals will be one stem, your backup vocals might be two stems. In video games, vertical reorchestration is done by having these stems that can be played in any combination at any amount. So these are all, by the way, from the game Red Dead Redemption 2. Fantastic storytelling game. So like, let's say you're out. Pretty simple thing. Now you're on your horse. You're in this Wild West setting. Kind of roots you a little bit. And you're moving through the town. And once you actually enter the town itself, now different things start to fall in. But then you get off your horse and it stops playing that little thumping sound. And you enter into the tavern. maybe action starts happening, and you leave the tavern. You see through. Apologies for how loud this is. But as it's playing, like you see, each thing can play on its own. Probably doesn't sound the best on its own, but any two creates a theme song, and you can take them away just as easily. And you're given a very different vibe within the same theme. So these are all. So you can play all of these at once, and it is a single theme, a score that is happening, or you can just play two, or you can just play five. And Red Dead Redemption does. You can take it off now. Red Dead Redemption does a fantastic job of that kind of modular production style, that vertical reorchestration. Because in that game, depending on where you are, you just have these themes constantly playing in the background, and each one of these is about 3 minutes long, but it's a 3 minute loop that's just always playing. And then the moment you do something different, you get on your horse, it adds in a new element. Now, if you're in a gunfight while on your horse, you have those two elements, but then you get off your horse, and now it's just the wander theme and the gunfight theme. Well, then maybe the gunfight gets really bad and you're shot a couple times. You got that red haze around your screen. Same thing, a new layer is going to be added, and then you make it away and you're able to heal yourself. Now that layer disappears. There's a lot of games that do that very effectively. Another one that I experienced recently, Helldivers 2. Very, if you ever seen Starship Troopers, it's a Helldivers 2 is a game about shooting giant bugs in space. That's pretty much the whole jam of the game. It's very fun, but I noticed recently when I was playing it, with a handful of friends that we were in a combat. There were a bunch of the enemy creatures around us. They were attacking us, and then one of the big ones showed up. And I was listening to the theme, and the music was playing this like intense action, dun 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 dun, kind of like rock techno-y kind of vibe. But then the moment this big thing showed up, these big brass notes just brom, 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 brom. And that was the first time I noticed it. I was like, oh no. And then we killed it, and then the brass went away, and then I died. But uh, it was still a fun thing, and the music kind of goes away when you die a little bit. But again, that was the first time I noticed it, and then I was listening to the music more in that game, and I was like paying attention to it more, and it actually does that. Like I didn't know that this game did the vertical reorchestration, but I started hearing it in lots of different areas. When at the very end of every mission, when you're trying to extract, it plays a specific theme. But then when enemies attack you while you're trying to extract, it adds a layer to that theme. It changes it into a more action, more high energy. Um, there we go. Back to the slideshow. Whoa, there's that animation again. All right. So moving on to topic number 4. That was a weird sound. Mechanics. So this is a fun bonus slide. Pretty much games that utilize, instead of the music being there to support the game, these are games that the music is core mechanic to the game. We have the classic here, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This is a favorite game for millions of gamers. In this game, you actually have an ocarina, and the player using the buttons on their controller actually has to play notes on the ocarina, and it'll give you a little like a piece, a staff bar of sheet music, and you actually have to play those notes in the right rhythm to do various things. But it evolves beyond just playing the music to doing those things. You can rewind time, you can summon storms. That's how you call your horse to show up out of the ether, and it runs up to you. So a lot of the core game mechanics revolve around the music, and the music in the game constantly reflects that ocarina music. So when the player starts playing that, there's no other theme that's playing until the player starts playing, and then other music will wash in. Very, very effectively done. Classic other rhythm games like Guitar Hero. I'm sure everyone here has at least heard of Guitar Hero. If you haven't, it was a big classic in the 2000s to 2010s, and it paved the way for a lot of those styles of rhythm games like Rock Band and DJ Hero and things like that. Guitar Hero, again, the game revolves entirely around the player performing a song. Excuse me. But in the similar thing, in a similar aspect to creating the player agency, it's not just you performing the song. If you miss a note, it plays the sound of like if a person it's like a weird feedback sound. Like if you strum a string wrong and it like plucks too far on a guitar, it plays like this very disjointed sound. And if you mess up enough, it'll fail you out of the sound, and the crowd boos you off the stage. Beat Saber is another fantastic one. I love playing Beat Saber. Again, I'm in VR development, so I've been a fan of VR for a while. Uh, Beat Saber is a game where you have two lightsabers and there's all these block notes that are just floating in your direction, and you have to hit them to the beat of the music. Similar to Guitar Hero, again, you are sort of performing the song, but instead of the player playing an instrument, you are just slashing these blocks through the air. Uh, it's a lot of fun. It's also a great way to sneakily get a workout in. Some of my favorite things with VR games, you're like, oh, I need to take a break. And then last and not least, Crypt of the Necrodancer. It is if you ever seen like old school like Zelda games where it's that top-down dungeon delver kind of vibe, except this game is also a rhythm game. So there is this really funky music playing in the background. I love the score for Crypt of the Necrodancer. Um, each like level has a different song that's constantly playing, and everything in that level, all the monsters, all the traps, everything is on beat with that music. And sometimes it's not a perfect 4/4. Sometimes it's a little more interesting or complex with its rhythm. So you have to learn the rhythm, and you literally walk and attack, and the monsters move and attack on that rhythm. And if you are off rhythm at all, you're going to have a very bad time. If you don't anticipate the rhythm correctly, you're going to have a very bad time. Um, I love that game. I've played it a couple times. I've died a lot because it's not also an easy game, but it's a very, very fun game. There's also so many other games that use music as mechanics, but I just wanted to highlight those four. And now we've come to the end of the thingy. I'm going to do this little slide here, which has my email, Instagram handle, a Bandcamp where you can listen to some of the music that I've made. But if anybody has any questions, please, I would love to answer. Yes.
So when you talk about Unreal,
Mhm.
so I know Brandon uses Unreal when he's his game production, but there's an aspect of Unreal where they have scripted or I guess already templated music in it. Is that something that is should he go that route, or should he actually get someone to produce the music for those types of deals?
So to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly, you're talking about like library music as opposed to
Correct.
like hiring a composer. Honestly, it's sort of back and forth on that. It really depends on scope of the project. If you can afford a composer, get a composer. Having your own score for a game will always elevate it beyond using library music. At the same time, if you're just making a short and simple like horror game, you're probably only going to need maybe 4 or 5 spooky horror themes, and maybe you'll hire like a composer to make the one menu theme that's going to be like the theme for your game. Library music, just like library sound effects, just like library assets, they have a place in the industry. I think one of the things that one of the lead developers for Unreal said is like in most games, a barrel is going to look like a barrel. It's a wooden barrel. It's got the little brackets, got a bunghole, all that good stuff. Uh, you don't need to recreate a barrel for every game. So if they have an asset marketplace with a wooden barrel, As long as it kind of fits the vibe of the game, you can just buy that for like $10 and slap it into your game. It's not going to make or break your game. Same with library music. Uh, Again, its scope. For the game that we're developing, we have a hybrid approach. There's some of the music that is written. I think we have two different composers. And then we're using a handful of library music. And I'm going into the library music to specifically chop it up and make sure that it has a loopability to it. Which again, I use the meta sounds for. I can have the intro play, and then it seamlessly transitions into the middle, which just loops forever. And then when I want that theme to end, it will play the outro of that thing, which is a lot of fun. If I composed the music or if I had somebody compose it for that game, it would be a lot easier because they could have just written it that way. But I had to go in and specifically cut them to make that happen. So it goes back and forth. Anyone else? Yes. Ooh, that's a great question. How did I get into like video games or music or both? Well, like I talked before, I've always been a big fan of storytelling. That's been just a big driving force in my life. Uh, I think I've always felt safest, like emotionally, in like when I can understand something through storytelling. That's why whenever I'm at a job, like and boss tells me do thing, like I usually just try to do the thing, but it's a lot easier when they can tell me the why, that even if it's a simple why, do this because this. Oh, cool, done. Like because I'm able to contextualize it within a like a cause and effect, a sort of storytelling. Uh, I got into music. I think both my mother and father played just so much music for me as a kid. I grew up on a lot of African, Celtic, Middle Eastern, and like Far Eastern Asian music. A lot of mixture of like traditional styles of music, all the way to like there were strangely a lot of German groups who would create like techno-y versions of like other more prehistoric music styles, um, which were a lot of fun. I only recently found out that a lot of those groups were German, which is cool. Kind of makes sense. They're really big in, or they were innovators in electronic scenes. Um, and so I think that set a really good foundation for, I guess, me not having a like a predisposition to a specific kind of music or a specific kind of storytelling. Um, I've always been behind the curve when it comes to pop music. It just takes me longer to integrate with it. But when it comes to more off the wall genres like uh, extreme musics like metal or experimental musics, those I'm able to stay more on the pulse of it, and that level of creativity and uh, lack of care for like established norms, that I think has been an edge for me when it comes to musical composition and learning and just creativity in general. Several years ago, I had a big like not good point in my life, and was able to use that, fortunately, thanks to a community around me of really great people, to build off of that and sort of reinvent myself. And I was able to utilize what was like a college education in music, and several years of band in high school, and actually turn that into getting to there's a podcast that I work on. It's a Dungeons and Dragons narrative podcast, but I get to produce all the music for it, which is super fun. And it's not always great music, but the best thing about that is like I've gotten to a point where I'm very comfortable failing. So if I make something dumb, I'm like, well, that's that episode. Enjoy, or don't. And then I make another score on another episode, and I'm like, wow, that's a banger right there. Um, and that eventually, working with that group, I got into game design for tabletop games. Um, worked with that for a while. I got into public speaking more with that as well. Would go to conventions, talk about tabletop games. I'd run D&D games for complete strangers. Did that for several years. I still do that every now and then now. And then met some really cool people who are automation experts, who wanted to make a video game, and they were like, "You're weird. Would you like to make a video game with us?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, let's do it." Um, so that worked out. That's sort of the nutshell of my journey. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Anyone else have any questions?
I,
Sneaky questions?
I have one more.
Yeah.
So I think it was maybe a year ago. They had over at the Sports Center at Virginia Center Commons. They had some a technology gaming tournament type deal, and they had a section over there with there was like 4 or 5 companies that are here locally that make games. Was one I wanted to know if you knew of any other gaming companies that produce games here, and two, was your company there? Because I may have met.
So I'm I think no to the second one. I don't think we were there because
Okay.
I was with them a year ago and I don't remember that happening. But they do. Uh, Robert, the head lead developer, and a CEO, has gone to like several other places. Like he's gone to MetaConnect before, which is the big like Facebook Meta VR sort of conference, and he's gone to Unreal Fest, which is the big Unreal Engine gamer nightmare convention that always happens at a weird time in the middle of the week. I don't know why they do that. But so they've been around to doing those. I don't think we went to that. I did hear about that. Um, I personally don't know as many local gaming groups as I would like to. Um, with where I am socially at the moment, there's a lot of like I work at a comic book store one day a week. I have the podcast. I have the video game, and I still manage to have time to go do fun things like this, which is solely due to Google Calendar and this person keeping me on track. Thank you. Uh, so that is one of my goals of this year is to meet some other local game studios. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Robert does. Robert's very connected with a lot of those things. Back when Twitter was still fun. He was very active in connecting to a lot of people in the community. I think he still has a Twitter account technically.
Right. I don't think they were as big as you guys are. I mean, they were like
We're big only through
individuals.
tenacity.
Right, but they were individuals who were
Yeah,
making games,
yeah,
but they wasn't making games that go into the mainstream. They were making games that were that you can make apps to like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Apple App Store, Google Store. But
Small indie games are the jam. Like
right,
that's where my heart still sits. I like playing AAA games sometimes. Generally like playing fun little indie games.
so my last question is,
Mhm.
how does a young person get into something like this and connect with a company or some sort of company like that so that they, I mean, if they're interested in it,
Yeah,
or at least have a pathway forward of things that they need to learn and get educated on to be
yeah.
successful in that industry?
Uh, so three things I'll say to that. Um, One of the biggest ones, and this is like literally for any field, but like learn what is important to that field and find out within that what is important to you and whatever is in that middle of that Venn diagram. Just always be learning that. Always, always, always. For me, like I love storytelling. I love knowing how to tell an effective story. I'm also the lead writer for the video game that we're creating. So I read books, I listen to audiobooks. I always try to find things that are a bit like challenging emotionally, uh, so that I'm constantly growing as a writer and also hopefully as a person. But like find what those things are that fit into that Venn diagram. If you want to get into technology and you also really care about your community, well, find that thing in the middle of how technology helps community and research the heck out of it and just always be learning. I always try to like watch one informative YouTube video a day kind of thing. So that's one. Two, and this goes into what I said before, get real comfortable with failing. Um, uh, One of my mentors has this amazing quote: "Make all your mistakes fast and at the beginning." So fail first, make a lot of mistakes, so that you can learn from them real fast. When you get into a new field, just mess up. That's the best thing to do, because then you will learn what the right things to do are. And if you're comfortable failing, getting to that point that you're comfortable failing isn't an easy thing. I don't want to make that sound like, oh, just be comfortable failing. It's fine. That's like telling a depressed person, just stop being sad. Uh, but it is very much like you just got to practice at failing, do things, find other people that are good at not caring about how their work like in general is, because then they can get to a point where they're like, well, this was bad, but this was good, and I know it's good because I can see why these things are bad. One of my favorite things to do musically is I'll do like little jam sessions with people sometimes, and the jam sessions are in no way us trying to make something that sounds good. It's us just trying to make sounds. And if we stumble upon sounds good, that's awesome. But we stumble upon, well, that sounded really weird, but I kind of liked it because this and this reason. Like, no one could decide on a rhythm the entire time. And that was great. It was very uncomfortable the whole time, but I loved it. And that kind of feeling, because then you learn more and it helps you separate from this is what the expectation is, and it allows you to innovate, which is one of the biggest things in any field, especially if you're getting into something technology based. Innovation can only come from a freedom of thinking. And the third thing is just connect with people, make friends, talk to people, go to conventions, conferences, places like this, reach out. It's honestly, I think, a huge chunk, and I don't think enough, uh, like people who have made it, whatever made it is in any particular situation. I don't think enough people say this. A big portion of it is luck. It's not a lovely thing, but a big portion of it is luck, and some people have more propensity to luck than others. Uh, but with that, the whole concept of like make your own luck, like if you keep trying, you're not going to win the lottery if you don't play the lottery. Not that you should play the lottery, but you're not going to get bitten by a shark if you're not in the ocean. That kind of thing. You're constantly hammering at it. You're constantly learning, and you're constantly making those connections. You're constantly challenging yourself. That will pay off. When that moment of luck comes, it will pay off. For me, it really was like a person I went to high school with that I've maintained a really good relationship with, was working in a warehouse with this other person who was an automation specialist at the time. And they were like, want to make video game together? And they started doing some stuff on the side. And then eventually, what they were doing was able to attract the attention of an investor who decided to fund the game. And then from there, they were like, well, now we need more people. It can't just be us two. And so they hired me and a handful of other people to join the team. So a little bit of his luck. That was a very luck-esque thing for me, but it was also like I was the right person for them to reach out to. So that having the that skill base. But biggest one for sure is just challenge yourself. Um, make a bad video game. That's always a jam. If you want to get into video games, make a real bad one. Um, It's like whenever I talk to people about writing stories, write a bad story. Just start with the expectation that the story's going to suck, and write a bad one, and then write another bad one, and then write another bad one, and then they're gonna just get it. They're gonna get better as they get worse, and you're gonna like you start off writing just like painful fan fiction, and then you end up writing like Mel Brooks level satire, and that's such a fun journey to go on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the journey I think with any, especially creative fields. The more comfortable you are with failing, the more humble you are with it too. Like I'm excited to get up and talk in front of a group of people, fully knowing that any number of things could go wrong. I could forget this. I literally did the rough draft of this entire thing on the phone with her last night while driving home from work. And her big note was like, "You're gonna say and a lot in this," and I'm like, "I didn't write a script, so yes, I probably will." And I'm sure I got up here and said and at least 80 times. But that often happens if I'm improvising things. So I'm just comfortable. I'm comfortable with it, and I try to grow from it. There we go. Yeah, good. Yeah, public speaking. I've been in public speaking for a while, and I'm very used to listening to what I'm saying as I'm saying it. And also, I love having recordings because then I watch myself and I'm like, oh, I should
Very
do that
true.
better. She actually told me one time I was doing an improv show at a convention. It's a very large audience of people, but it was one of the first improv shows that I did with a large audience. And I kept turning to face people, and she informed me later, is like, "Hey, you really should face the crowd more often." And I was like, "You right, you right." So the second time I did that, the next year, I remembered. But yeah, sorry, your question.
It's okay. So my question is, if I were like a 14-year-old kid and I said, "Hey, I just want to play around with like trying to make music for a video game. What is the best tool to possibly use to get
Thank you
started
for
with that?"
asking that. Yeah. So best tools. Gosh, there's a lot. Depends on, I will say, your hardware, honestly. If you don't really have access to a lot of technology, uh, I mean, best thing to do, I used to do this a lot, and I still like I hum and make up melodies and songs in my head. Sometimes they're very simplistic, but it's still that kind of vibe. Something I did as a project in university was we were just given trailers for video games, and these were very indie video games. I don't think all of them even made it to market. We were given trailers, and they just told us like delete all the audio for that trailer and just make your own music and sound effects. And if there's voices, do your own voiceover and just do that. And I did that for I think three in a row. Two of them were God, they were really bad. Because they were characters that definitely should not have had my voice, but they had my voice. And so watching them back, I was like, hmm? But the music I think was really good that I was able to create for them because they were all uh, uh, very aesthetic pieces. One of them was like a classic like zombie survival thing and like a big wheat field as like a setting. And I was able to just I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I want to lean into like country and banjo, or do I want to lean into just like? And I think I landed in just like a slow steel guitar and just like that slow strumming. Um, as like the bass music for that trailer, but literally just going in and doing your own audio post production on just videos of things is a fantastic way to build that skill set. When it comes to software, what I've used for years, I use Logic, which I showed you here. Logic is the paid for version of GarageBand, which is free. Both of those are Apple exclusive, though. So if you don't have an Apple product, you have to find some magical way to get that. There are still ways to do it. They're not always legal, but uh, so those two are Apple softwares. GarageBand is very potent, and you can do a lot with it. I haven't had I've had the MacBook for a long time. I recently got a iPad for the first time in my life, and I got GarageBand on it, and that is so heckin' fun to play with, and it is so powerful as far as a DAW or DAW, a digital audio workstation. Um, Incredibly powerful. But Logic Pro is, of course, more powerful, but it costs like I think $300. Cool thing with Logic though, the reason I love it is you pay once and you get upgrades. Anytime it updates, it just updates for free. You don't have to pay for it again. A lot of other audio softwares like I use Reason, which is a Scandinavian made company. It used to be called Propellerhead Reason, but now it's just called Reason. Very fun if you have any experience working with real life audio technology. Reason actually has like you can flip the interface backwards and it has like the plugs and wires, so you can actually tangibly rewire and replug things. It's also a fantastic way to learn how that stuff works, so that if you ever do that and then you go into doing live audio like I sometimes do for her band, I know how and why things plug into each other and what signal training is. um, Reason does not have a free version, but there is one that's similar that works on PC called Reaper. Reaper's fantastic. It is free. There is a lot of plugins that you can get that do cost money, but Reaper itself is free. Um, a lot of flexibility and really nice user interface. And the last one that I'll talk about is honestly one of my favorite audio softwares in the world, mostly because of how free it is. uh, Audacity. The absolute audacity of this company to like it is one of the honestly most powerful audio workstations in the world. The one problem with it is it has a moderately frustrating uh, visual user interface. It is very much like using a DOS level user interface, but you can do so much with it. So if you spend like, an hour a day just watching YouTube tutorials on how to use Audacity, you can do so much. The audio that I did for this, those little like clips, I literally just, I have the albums for those scores. I just took those, popped them into Audacity, chopped them, put a fade in, fade out, and done. And it was so fast and easy to do. I could do that in Logic. It would take a little bit, teeny bit longer to do, and you can be much more exacting in Logic. But for just what I needed, it was so fast and easy. So Audacity, amazing freeware, tricky interface. Reaper, also free, really nice interface and a great thing to grow with, especially if you want to get into more music. Uh, Reason, incredibly powerful, super not free. I think Reason's upwards in like the $400 range, 4 to 5. And then if you have Apple products, GarageBand and Logic Pro as a step up from that one. Absolutely jam. I love also GarageBand and Logic. I just thought about this. Work really well for live productions too. Logic has, and both of them have virtual like guitar pedals and amps and preamps, which is a fun way to learn how those work. So if you ever want to get into again live production, GarageBand and Logic are a fantastic way to learn how those systems work. Hope that answered your question. Yeah. Well, I will. I'll conclude this for like the stream and this here. But I'm probably going to hang out for another couple minutes. If anybody had any other questions, feel free to ask. Again, I am I'm a writer, audio engineer, composer, sound designer. I do all of the music and sound effects for the Quid Pro Roll podcast, which you can hear a lot of it on the Bandcamp. And I do all of the audio and sound effects for the Heartlands video games, VR video games. We'll be going into alpha very soon, like probably by the end of next month. We'll be entering our alpha. So if you like VR games, if you like games like Skyrim or Oblivion, it's that but VR. It's going to be a jam. And I get to do all the sick sound effects for it. Some of these sound effects, so cool. And I'm not saying that because like I'm super cool. I am. But I'm saying that because like again, it's that thing of like when you're comfortable enough with messing up, you stumble upon things and you do stuff. You're like, wow, that sounds really cool. How can I make this cooler? And you just tweak it just a little bit, and then you have to take a moment. You knock your glasses off. You're like, oh, that was good. It's a good sound effect. And you always love because if you ever play a video game, even like I think Candy Crush is so good with the sound effects. Every time you get that sweet, you're like, yeah, scrumptious. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm so good at this game, type of thing. Oh, Sound effects really build it. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the Musical Creation Foundation for having us here, um, and for this lovely building for being here so that we can have this. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. Let's give him a round of applause for Gabriel.
Well, thank you so
Oh, wow. I like that.
much.
Yeah, so that was very fascinating, Gabriel. So I mean that kind of tied right in. And I think that's what we talked about, that you were going to tie into what Brandon was talking about
Yeah.
the last month. And
Yeah.
you tied right into that.
There's a lot when it comes to game production. I loved his presentation because one of the big things constantly is that switch between designer and developer, and like the number of times in, again, the video game that I've been working with, that we will like, I'll be like, hey, this is a really cool thing that can happen in the game, and then Robert goes, that's actually impossible in our game, and I'm like,
Correct, correct. And that's yeah.
it's a good
So
thing I checked before I wrote it.
so quick update on that. Brandon moved forward after he did his brief here, and then he discovered that he doesn't have the space for Unreal. So he called me. So
Yes.
so I do stuff on AWS.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
solutions architect. So he called me and said, "Dad, I'm gonna need to put you in the game." I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "I need space." And so you had an app. I think it was called Clux. I forget the name of it. Cyrux or something. Helix. Helix.
Helix, yeah.
Procore Helix. That's what it was. And he needed that app so that he and other developers can actually share stuff. But it had to be secure and it had to be remote enough. So I built him a server stack
Yeah.
on AWS on his account, by the way. So which only costs, I think it's 0.002
Yeah.
per hour.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
which is cool. So he is moving forward now with he pulled the Unreal up and he started doing motions
Yeah.
with some of his characters. His lore is complete.
I love that.
So he's moving forward whenever he has time with his regular software
Yeah.
development gig. So
Yeah.
so that's just a quick report on what happened
That's exciting.
last
Yeah.
month, and he's moving forward with it because
Storage is always a nightmare.
It is.
For video games. Our game is going to ship nice and small because it has to be able to load on a VR headset. So it's
Right.
going to ship real small. But I think the game itself is 600 gigabytes at the moment,
Right.
as just like all the files, and that's not counting the stuff that's not in the engine. That's just in the engine stuff. There's still a handful of things that aren't in the engine, that are being worked on, and I still have to record a bunch of dialogue and get that in, which is going to be more. But yeah, uncompressed games are
Right.
humongous. It is
Right.
insane.
Yeah.
I think the last Grand Theft Auto game was a little over a terabyte uncompressed.
Wow.
Compresses down to like 50 gigs or something like that, but
Correct.
still.
Right. Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you about this. And I see you from time to time, and we talk about what you do, and we end up talking 4 or 5 hours about what you do. But it's for me, it's very educational. So
I am glad.
yeah, so I always love it.
I am good at talking, and it is very good to know that hopefully it's entertaining when I talk.
Yes, yeah, and
Or
educational.
informative and educational.
Yeah, it's very educational. So, again, I just wanted to say thank you to Gabriel for taking his time, and Jessica for keeping him on track, for coming here to do this for Musical Creation Foundation.
Yeah, I'm
at
I'm so
Shiloh.
excited for this.
So, and so if you guys, he's going to stay for a little bit. If you have questions that you just didn't want to go on camera and ask, the camera's only showing us up here anyway, so it doesn't see you guys back there. Just so you know.
You've been on camera this whole time.
And then immediately after this, if you're on the Musical Creation Foundation board, if we can stay back for a little bit for a quick meeting and a quick kind of, I call them hot washes or retrospects. In his world, that's what they call them. So we can keep this thing going. And there was one other thing. Postmortem. There was one other thing that I would like. There was an agenda here. So I always like to connect young people with people that can move them in the right direction. And Nika, if you have time today, can you sit with Miss Alexis, and talk through some of that? Maybe get a connect, and you
Yeah.
guys communicate from there. So I appreciate it. All right, that's our deal for the day. Jody, can you cut me off?
Throw a
So
rock at it, quick.
yeah. Otherwise, we're gonna have to edit this, and it's going on live right now. So all right.
Beware.
That's if you have anything else, I'm gonna hang out here for a little bit, and that my board is here. If you can raise your hand, musical creation board. Jody is one of the board members. We got Miss Pam, and of course, Nika Simone. Real name Nika Young, aka Nika Simone. I got to make sure I do that right, and I'm the president. So, all right, thank you.